Hello lovely people, and welcome back to my video series on disability and disability related tropes in the media. Boom. I mean, can I call this a series if I do one a year? I don't know. I had a baby. My researching and writing time has significantly decreased. But I absolutely loved making previous videos about the portrayal of disabilities on screen. I did a gay one too, so you can click the card in the top left-hand corner or the link in the description to watch my video about OCD on screen. And looking at how those either resonate or don't resonate with those communities, I also wanted to put my film history degree to good use because, after all, I'm still very much paying it off. Probably will be for the next however many years. But rather than a specific disability, I thought it would be interesting this time to look at one of the tropes that's often employed when disability is portrayed in media. The disability superpower trope. A trope is a significant or recurrent theme, also known as a motif. The disability superpower trope is one in which disabled people are portrayed as being extra amazing because of their disability. One obvious example would be becoming blind and then having an enhanced sense of smell, a la Daredevil. Or Dr. Midnight from the MC universe, who was blinded by an explosion in that it made him able to see so well in the dark, he's just unable to see in the light. Remarkable. Fun and japes aside though, these tropes put extra pressure on disabled folk who might just, want to relax and take it easy rather than feeling they should be researching how to miraculously levitate and fly. If you missed it, that's in the Disability Handbook section 2E, page 21, paragraph 5, under Absolutely Not Today Nor Ever, Get the Hell Out of Here. So let's break it down. Now, according to the Equality Act 2010, disability is defined as having a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial or long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. You'll also be classified as disabled if you have a progressive condition which worsens over time, or on the day you are diagnosed with HIV, cancer, or multiple sclerosis. Back in the day, the portrayal of disability on screen was, for want of a better word, tragic. And I'd love to sit here and say that we've come on leaps and bounds, and I mean in some cases we have, but also that's not always the case. The media has a long-standing track record of using stereotypes to portray disabilities on screen. We're talking about a character who isn't exactly well-rounded here. They have personality traits that we expect. Their likes and dislikes are what we would expect. Even the way they look and act are what we would expect. Side note, I'm going to be using the word cripple here a lot. I don't love that as a term for myself, generally due to it being, used against me in cruel ways, even when it's supposed to be light-hearted teasing by the adults in my life. It wasn't. It's only a joke if we're both in on it, so just be honest that you're an arsehole. Anyway, and I don't support that term being used towards anyone else. However, I do fully support people reclaiming the term and using it for themselves, labelling their fancy walking stick as crip couture or whatever have you. I mean, that last one is particularly fabulous. But I am going to be using it satirically in reference to concepts and fictional characters because it's what they're written to say, so. The main cliches here are the villain. Usually someone found with a hook for a hand or a wooden leg. Who knew that needing assistance with your mobility meant you were also a part-time serial killer? This villain is a morally perturbed character who also suffers a debilitating physical condition, quite often requiring a motorised wheelchair so they can glide into the room whilst sinister music plays. Also a life support machine, because people who need supplemental oxygen are definitely using it to expand their minds for nefarious means, right? They are, of course, obviously, a genius. Once your bum hits a wheelchair, you either lose 50 IQ points or become a genius. Hollywood. This intellectual threat compensates for their physical frailty and allows them to contrast the morally upright and physically perfect hero. However, the disabled villain can also become a physical threat if they use futuristic enhancements to overcome their disability, such as replacing missing or defective limbs with super strong powered armour or cybernetic parts. And they don't even need to be geniuses for that storyline. So, now, whether this is conscious or not on the part of the writer, this trope is actually rooted in eugenics. The eugenics-based ideas linking disability and deformity with a predisposition towards vice, criminality and insanity. Wonderful. The crippled body here merely represents a crippled soul. Thanks but no thanks. It's not the disabled representation we were asking for. Unfortunately, this does nothing but reinforce cultural ideas of disability making a person inherently bad, much like queerness or femininity in men, making someone a de facto villain in a classic Disney movie. The victim. Honestly, there are too many examples of this to list, but you only have to watch The Hunchback of Notre Dame or A Christmas Carol to realise you've been conditioned into feeling sympathy for the characters rather than genuine compassion or, seeing them as a person. Also usually found accompanied by a sad piano soundtrack to make these helpless characters seem even more helpless. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a CD out there somewhere specifically for that purpose. Cripples at Christmas. The victim exists mainly to inspire the normal people. Whilst they appear superficially weak, they are strong of spirit and can achieve such amazing things as existing while different. We see this character in Oscar-baiting movies in which an able-bodied actor shows us how amazing they are to choose to be disabled for a bit, or in a sitcom in which a disabled character is lauded for their reserves of strength in doing something incredibly ordinary like giving a speech or going on a date. Oh, but don't actually talk about any real-world issues, like how there aren't enough disabled parking spaces or funding to help the kids with extra needs stay in mainstream education. That's the sad stuff we're not here to talk about. No. Smoothly sliding into the sponsorship section of today's video. Surfshark are the sponsor of today's video, protector of my online internet life. It's a great VPN service that allows you to protect your data and identity from thieves, protect your privacy online, publish without a geotag, keep your web browsing private, prevent internet throttling, and can be used across multiple devices. It's a family affair. One of my personal favourite features is that with Surfshark you can change your location to any country in the world, enabling you to watch shows and movies on streaming services you wouldn't normally have access to. If you're a Marvel fan like me, you may know Iron Man was the first ever MCU film to be released back in 2008. You may also be aware that since the rise of Disney+, the MCU catalogue is now only available there and has been removed from other streaming services such as Netflix UK, US and Australia. But I can still watch Iron Man, and so can you, thanks to Surfshark with a quick change of location to Japan. And voila, we have access to Iron Man on Netflix again. Click the link in the description and use code Jessica, 83% off Surfshark plus 3 months extra for free. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so go, go, go. Click that link. The butt of the joke. Although not always consciously, we see some disabilities as the butt of the joke, such as stammers in comedy characters or Mary's brother Warren in There's Something About Mary. Usually these cliches are reserved for boys who can't get a date with a girl, or TV producers who can't get a grip. So done. This also allows for things like wheelchair antics. Remember the episode of Glee where the whole Glee club spends the day in wheelchairs to help them relate to Artie, the wheelchair-using member of the club, that was then concluded with a musical performance of Proud Mary whilst in the chairs? Where do they even find that many wheelchairs? I mean, that's not the main issue with that plotline, obviously. Why do they have a wheelchair-using character not played by a wheelchair-using actor anyway? But how, in universe, did they find that many wheelchairs? I just have questions. And not to be a party pooper, but I'm definitely going to be a party pooper. As someone who constantly had my crutches stolen from me at school so kids could run away with them for jolly japes, do we not think that all the shows where people treat medical equipment like it's hilarious might possibly, just possibly, be encouraging this? The eternally innocent. We know the examples. Forrest Gump, Rain Man, or most recently, Hubby Halloween on Netflix, a seasonal film which followed the life of a man called Hubby, which I'm now realising may be pronounced Hubie. Hubie Halloween, would that make more sense? I'm too deaf for this, okay? I don't know pronunciation. He may be called Hubby or Hubie, but he has a learning disability, and he is played as a protector of the town. This cliche shows disabled folks as simple beings, incapable of complex emotions, which is, incredibly patronising and damaging. I mean, as much as we all want a thermos flask that doubles as a Swiss Army knife, we also want representation. That was a weird one. In some stories, eccentricity and insanity may also be bywords for kindness and generosity. The characters may preserve childlike innocence lost by normal people, or their mental health conditions may inspire them to do things that would seem irrational but actually have deep meaning, especially if they're a religious character. In medieval times, it was a common belief that eccentrics were touched by God, and saints were expected to behave in a quirky manner. That's why they got gruesomely murdered, obviously. And lastly, the superhero. Largely disliked as a trope by disabled people, these characters with disabilities are shown as going above and beyond the level of even non-disabled people, in spite of their disabilities. This has led to the belief that a wheelchair user should be training for the Paralympics, or a genius cripple. Anyone blind or with a learning disability should be practicing to be a famous artist. And that having clinical depression should obviously turn you into a famous writer. Yeah, obviously. Turn that disability right upside down. In some cases, the character turns out to have a special talent or skill that no other character can beat, sometimes implicitly making up for the disability, sometimes bordering on a just straight superpower. And while it's certainly an improvement on pity, it can get irritating, since, you know, most disabled people just kind of want to get on with life. I mean, it would be nice to have more ramps. That would be nice. I'd like it if my medication was delivered on time and I didn't have to argue every single month with the pharmacy about the fact that I'm not an old lady. That would be great. They refuse to deliver to my house because I'm not an old lady. They don't seem to think that people can need medication at a young age. Literally, that's their thinking. Why do you need so much medication? You're so young. Tell me about it. Would you like to take this up with my body? File a complaint, ma'am. Get in line. Unsurprisingly, this trait is disparagingly known as the super crip. This trope has emerged more and more in the past few years. Society and the media have become increasingly aware of inclusivity and discrimination on minority groups. But instead of, you know, levelling out the playing field, we've just gone in the opposite direction. Where disabled folks were historically portrayed as those secondary characters we were talking about before, props to move the narrative along or even the sub-sob storylines. Definitely coining that phrase. We're now entering an era where disabled people can't just be disabled, they have to be extra special. Whether that's the fictional superpower such as Captain Rhodes from the Marvel Universe, who's paraplegic yet still manages to fly around in his suit, or just someone who's perceived as an overachiever, like Sean from The Good Doctor, whose autism makes him such an amazing doctor-like wow, that he can spot a millisecond of altered heart activity so subtle that not even the monitors can pick it up. He can also recall every page of every single medical textbook he's ever read and immediately recall relevant information for the situation, thus allowing him to make technically perfect medical decisions at all times. I don't know why neurotypical doctors bother, really. According to that show, anyone who has had to look something up twice is useless. Disabled people are also meant to do the undoable, such as in Senior Year, the Netflix film featuring Rebel Wilson, where a girl miraculously wakes up from a coma after 20 years with no impact on her physical or mental health. She even gets gifted an iPhone that she uses straight out of the box with no instructions. I mean, I can't do that, and I'm firmly planted in this decade. I can't lie, I've done the rehab, the physical therapy, the let's get this bit of your body working, uphill struggle, myself, and it is boring, yeah. There's a reason they make it a montage in films. There's just a lot of, 2 steps forwards, 1 step backwards, but your expectations may be a little high on the 2 decades of coma and we'll be fine one. Let's take a look at some other examples of what the internet's coining. I love that word. Hollywood disability. A really great way to see the superhero trope in action is in the actual superhero world. Now, there's no denying that superheroes have the power to inspire and entertain an audience, especially younger people who often look to this alternative reality as a form of escapism, she says as one of those younger people. But this is a virtual playing field for a cross-section of society, and the way certain characters are portrayed isn't always the best. So, let's look at some examples here. Daredevil, Matt Murdock. I mean, this character was rendered blind from having toxic chemicals thrown in his face, and like many others who are visually impaired, he relies on listening intently, mapping the world around him with his fingers and body, and paying attention to disturbances in the air in order to orient himself. However, unlike most other completely blind or visually impaired people, Matt Murdock's other senses are so heightened that he is almost not blind, because they're just so good, he can basically see a 3D render of the world. Now, I personally think that this is fine if we say it's the toxic chemicals that gave him the radar-like powers. Radioactive chemicals? Radar powers? Makes perfect sense. Just ask Spider-Man. But if we just present it as, oh, he's blind, therefore he can hear things really well, then it's an irritatingly unrealistic portrayal of blindness. And I might have a vested interest in this though, because as a deaf person who gets asked whether I can see better all the time, I'm blind in one eye, so no. Captain Marvel Jr. Freddie Freeman first appeared in Whiz Comics in the 1940s as a civilian casualty of the battle between his hero, Captain Marvel, and the superpowered Aryan villain, Captain Nazi. Oh yes, they really were that on the nose with the naming of villains back then. During the battle, Freddy's left leg is paralysed and his grandfather is killed. So Captain Marvel takes pity on him and shares some of his powers with the boy, allowing him to transform into a superpowered version of himself as soon as he says, "Captain Marvel!" Of course, once he's finished with that week's story, he then has to go back to just being Freddy in his sad little wheelchair, meaning that every edition is just a tale of Freddy trying to escape rather than come to terms with and live with his disability. Oh, Freddy, they did you wrong. Oracle. Once again showing that if you become physically disabled and can't do the thing you were super amazingly good at before, then you better develop some genius level powers and become better than everyone else at a different thing. It's Barbara Gordon, otherwise known as Catwoman. Being shot in the spine by the Joker and paralysed from the waist down isn't even the worst part of her injury though. It's that he does it to annoy her dad. Because she's just his property, right? Why? Despite this, Barbara becomes the DCU's resident computer genius and director of the Birds of Prey, quickly becoming a fan favourite, until they brought her back in the New 52 as able-bodied. Which, what? Wasn't she meant to be training Wendy Harris, aka Proxy, who's also a paraplegic character, but now she can walk? Oh my god. Komodo, aka Melody Kasuma, is a double amputee in her human form, but thanks to Dr. Kurt Connors, who's a Spider-Man villain, Lizard, she's able to transform into a creature that can not only walk, but also regrow lost body parts. If only it were as simple as a short trip to Pets at Home to pick up an amphibian, eh? Unlike the original Lizard, Komodo has a much greater level of control over when her transformations happen, and doesn't become a mindless animal. But the treatment of her disabilities in the comic books hasn't been all that great. In Avengers The Initiative #3, during a battle with Spider-Man that just develops into an insult-throwing contest, Spidey threatens Komodo with the removal of her powers and she just breaks down sobbing, claiming that without her powers, and thus her legs, she's nobody. Thanks, Marvel. It's realistic and relatable to portray characters struggling with a disability. I mean, we all struggle at some point with every part of our identity, but we're gonna need some disabled joy and just, you know, bland everyday acceptance mixed in with the "why me?" or else you're just being rude about us. Side point though, at least no one tries to cure her disability completely. Jericho! Probably the unhappiest story on the list. That's saying something. Young Joseph Wilson, aka Jericho, was held hostage by a terrorist named Jackal to force his father, Slade Wilson, better known as Deathstroke, to divulge secret information, but they severely underestimated his father, who just didn't care that much. Great fathering. And as a result, young Joseph's throat was slit, rendering him mute. His character was initially portrayed with a lot of sensitivity and insight, as his emotions and thoughts were conveyed through visuals, rather than just relying on the age-old thought bubble to spell things out to the reader. He also used American Sign Language to communicate. However, the writers started a badly portrayed storyline of insanity for him that wasn't very well received, and then, oops, just walked everything back. And now he's fully sane and he can talk again. I'm sorry, what now? There goes the mutism representation. And while we're on the topic of destroying representation, Puck. Eugene Milton Judd is a tough and lovable member of the Canadian superhero team Alpha Flight, a spin-off of Marvel's Uncanny X-Men, who also has a very short fuse. He has a type of dwarfism known as achondroplasty that also causes him chronic pain, but he's relentlessly positive and is able to use his diminished size and agility to his advantage, utilising his body as a weapon and cartwheeling through opponents, usually with a few cheeky one-liners thrown in. However, sadly, the original conception of Puck as a happy dwarf who could kick ass without superpowers was retconned to Volume 3 of Alpha Flight, and in it, Puck is just reimagined as a thief, trapped by an ancient blade, whose short stature is just the result of magic, rather than a disability. Boo. This decision was understandably highly controversial and just flat insulting. He was pretty cool being himself, but no. Sadly, once his character attributes were adjusted, he was less fun and much more annoying. See? Chronically ill people, fun! Magic people, annoying. Moon Knight, a mercenary with dissociative identity disorder who gets special powers from an Egyptian moon god called Khonshu, as you do. Mark Spector, also known as Moon Knight, has the benefit of being able to hear from multiple viewpoints in his head at once and thus can figure things out before other characters. So his disability is an asset. So we know why the superhero trope is problematic in terms of portraying disabilities in the wrong way, but what's the actual effect? Well, on the surface, these portrayals, although exaggerated and unrealistic, it could be argued, allow those who have a physical or mental impairment to see themselves represented on screen in a way which they've never experienced before, right? Well, yes! But the superpowers these characters have also kind of directly negate their disabilities, making disabled folks question, could I actually be a superhero if I can't overcome my own disability? Why do we need to overcome it, friends? Why? Thus leading them to question their own internal sense of self and ultimately strength. And there's nothing magical about that. Like any portrayal of a minority group on screen, I personally think the best way to inspire, ignite, and teach people about their narratives is to make them realistic, as much as you can with, a superhero story. There are some examples out there of superheroes whose superpowers don't directly interact with their disability, such as Professor X. Charles Xavier. He's both paraplegic and a telepathic mutant, but his telepathic abilities aren't directly able to make him walk again, although his mental self does often walk when inside a person's consciousness. In X-Men, Charles is a globally respected scientific expert in the field of genetics and plays an ambassadorial role in promoting peaceful relations between humans and their superpowered counterparts. Attempts are not made at curing the Professor because why would they be? That would be insulting and largely redundant since his powers don't require anything from him physically. Hawkeye, aka Clint Barton, is a superhero I have discussed before, and you can click the link at the top left-hand corner or in the description to watch that video. Hawkeye's eardrums were damaged in action, leading to him become deaf or hard of hearing in the MCU. He's only hard of hearing in the MCU. Deaf in the comics. However, he's learnt to use sign language as a communication tool and to read people's body language. Again, his superpower doesn't improve this, it's just part of his makeup, part of who he is. Echo, another comic book character who also appears in the Hawkeye TV show that we have previously discussed on this channel. She's the adopted daughter of crime boss Kingpin, and she follows suit fighting against other superheroes such as Daredevil. Echo is born deaf and uses ASL to communicate. This doesn't affect her ability to have strong fighting skills. In fact, the two don't have any connection, which is even better. Doctor Strange. I guess he's potentially a grey area in terms of good or bad representation, but I do like that he spends a large portion of the time right after his injury trying to fix it, and then comes to terms with the fact he can't. As you probably know, Stephen Strange was an incredible neurosurgeon before the tragic car accident was causing nerve damage to both of his hands. Of all the disabled or injured characters in superhero comics and films, Doctor Strange having his hands crushed and broken and then having to relearn how to use them and realizing he'll never be able to do the same things again is probably the one I relate to most. So I have a genetic disability that paralyzes my limbs quite suddenly for periods of time, and the first time it happened in a big way was when I paralyzed both of my arms for a year and a half when I was a teenager. They've never worked as well as they did before. And that scene of looking down at your hands and they just don't move how you want them to is painfully realistic. Sadly, unlike Doctor Strange, I haven't used my lack of fine motor skills to spur me into learning actual magic. I'm happy to report that I can live with my disability without needing the boost in mystical skills. So go me. One thing I do really like is that Doctor Strange's hands reach a point where they just don't improve beyond that. And that doesn't just apply to his ability to do amazing things like surgery, but also simple things like putting his own clothes on, doing up buttons, which he then just gets magic to do for him. I guess in the real world you just have to get a carer. Can't put clothes on. I've got magic though, so it's fine. Not that disabled because I've got magic. Buttons though. Freaking buttons. Baby buttons. That's a great way to remind yourself you're not able-bodied. Have a baby and then try to do up their buttons. I do like that even with his magic as the Sorcerer Supreme, he just still can't go back to his old life as a surgeon and with Christine. In real life, magic just doesn't cure disabilities. It doesn't. Deadpool, one anti-hero we all know and love. So he's terminally ill with cancer, and then he's offered a place in a program that might provide a cure for his cancer, but oh no, it just gave him superpowers, and he's still dying of cancer, constantly. It's just that his body now heals back to its cancer-ridden state. Oh. It sounds weird saying it out loud, but I really enjoy watching someone in constant pain. It's just so relatable. There's also something to be said for the realism of it. Like, yes, if you're a superhero, even one who heals particularly well, it's going to hurt a lot. But what would be even better in terms of representation? How about a superhero whose physical or mental disability isn't made reference to at all? Like, it's not even part of the narrative. I mean, if we want to normalise perceptions within society of disability, then we have to normalise what we see on screen and around us first. It's definitely a good thing for people to not only see a character that's like them, but also badass and still has to deal with the same difficulties. However, we shouldn't be saying that the only way to make these daunting characters cool or brave is for them to use superpowers to erase their disability or become able-bodied. Because erasing, my friends, is, as far as last I checked, not the definition of representing. We 100% need more disabled characters who not only save the world, but gain their love and trust, are at the forefront of change, just struggle with their condition and just share raw emotions. Everyone deserves representation on screen, and accurate representation is that. We all want to be the heroes of our own narrative and not be told that we have to change or erase parts of us to do that. There are definitely going to be some amazing disabled superheroes that I missed out on talking about today, largely because I was talking about the ones that I don't love the representation of. And then ones that I'm like, yeah, they're okay, I'll do. So please do in the comments below, list the ones that you think are actually really good. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this sort of deep dive into the classic disability superpower trope. Let me know who your favourite disabled superhero is and why you think they're actually a really good representation. Feel free to argue with me and say it's someone that I said I don't think is that great. Thank you to Surfshark for sponsoring today's video, and remember to click the link in the description and use code Jessica for 83% off Surfshark plus 3 months extra for free. I will see you in my next video. Mwah.